Magic and Mystery in Tibet by Alexandra David-Neel. Chapter 5. The incidents connected with the admission of a disciple by a mystic teacher, the first years of his novitiate, the tests imposed on him, the peculiar circumstances in which spiritual illumination draws upon him, might in many cases supply the material for a most curious novel. Hundreds of such wonderful stories, either ancient or of recent date, handed down by oral tradition, written in the biographies of famous lamas, or even told by living witnesses, are circulated all over Tibet, translated into foreign language, read in countries whose customs, thoughts, and physical aspect are so different from those of Tibet. The charm of that strange golden legend largely vanishes, but when told with the pathetic accent of a believer in the chiara oscura of a monastic cell or under the rocky ceiling of a cave hermitage, the very soul of Tibet reveals itself in its mystic, powerful originality, a thirst for occult knowledge and spiritual life. I shall first tell briefly the fantastic and symbolic story of Tilopa's initiation. Though he himself was a native of Bengal and never crossed the border of Tibet, he is considered as the spiritual ancestor of one of the most important of the Red Hat sects, that of the Kagyupas, Kagyudpas. I may add, by the way, that it is in a monastery of this sect that the Lama Yongden began his novitiate at the early age of 8. Tilopa is seated reading a philosophic treatise when an aged beggar woman appears behind him, reads or makes a pretense of reading a few lines over his shoulder and asks him abruptly, "Do you understand what you are reading?" Tilopa feels indignant. What does this witch mean by putting to him such an impertinent question? But the woman does not allow him the time to express his feelings. She spits on the book. This time the reader jumps up. How can that diabolical wretch dare to spit upon the holy scriptures? In answer to his vehement reproaches, the woman spits a second time on the book, utters a word that Tilopa cannot understand, and disappears. Strangely enough, that word, which was nothing to him but an unintelligible sound, yet suddenly calmed Tilopa's anger. An uncomfortable sensation spreads all over his frame. Distrust, doubt of his knowledge arise in his mind. After all, it may be true that he has not understood the doctrine expounded in that treatise, or any doctrine whatever, and that he is but an utter ignoramus. What did that strange woman say? What word did she pronounce that he was not able to catch? He wants to know it. He feels he must know it. And so Tilopa starts in search of the old woman, and after much wandering and exertion, he found her at night in a solitary wood, and then it says in brackets, others say in a cemetery. She was seated alone, her red eyes shining like live coals in the darkness. And here's a footnote, and I'm going to read this footnote. Let me see. It must be understood that the strange woman is a Dakini. Tibetans call them Kadoma, Khadoma. But in mystical terminology, they often use the Sanskrit name Dakini, or its abbreviation Daki. These are a kind of fairies who play a great part in mystic Lamaism as teachers of secret doctrines and are styled mothers in quotes. They often appear in the shape of an aged woman, and one of their particular signs is that they have red or green eyes. There are two kinds of Kadomas. the spiritual ones who do not belong to our world, and they are called Kadomas of wisdom, and the Kadomas who either incarnated as a woman or not, belonging to our world. Now we come back to the text. In the course of the conversation that followed, Tilopa was directed to go to Dakinis' land in order to meet their queen. On the road, dangers of countless kinds awaited him. Abysses, roaring torrents, ferocious animals, delusive mirages, ghastly apparitions, hungry demons. If he allowed himself to be overpowered by fear or missed the narrow thread-like path winding across the terrible region, he would fall prey to the monsters. If, driven by his thirst or hunger, he drank from the clear springs, or he ate the fruits hanging at hand on the trees on the road, if he yielded to the fair maidens inviting him to sport with them in pleasant groves, he himself would become bewildered and incapable of finding his way. For his protection, the woman gave him a magic formula. This he must repeat all along the road, keeping his mind entirely concentrated on it, uttering no word, listening to nothing. Some believe that Tilopa actually achieved the phantasmagoric journey. Others, better informed regarding the various experiences that may be undergone during a peculiar state of trance, see in it a form of psychic phenomena. Anyhow, Tilopa saw the countless frightful or alluring sights, and he struggled across the rocky slopes and foaming rivers. He felt himself freezing amidst the snows, scorched on burning sandy steps, and never departed from his concentration of the magic words. At last he reached the castle, whose bronze walls were glowing with heat. Monstrous, gigantic females opened wide mouths to devour him. Trees with branches holding weapons barred his way, yet he entered the enchanted place. There, innumerable sumptuous rooms formed a labyrinth. Tilopa wended his way through them, and he reached the queen's apartment. There was the beautiful fairy, seated on her throne, adorned with precious jewels, and she smiled at the daring pilgrim as he crossed the threshold. But he, unmoved by her loveliness, ascended the steps of the throne, and still repeating the mantra, wrenched from her the glittering jewels, trampled underfoot the flowery garlands, tore away her precious silk and golden robes, and as she lay naked on her wretched throne, he violated her. Such conquests of a Dakini, either by sheer violence or by magic devices, are a current theme in Tibetan mystic literature. They are an allegory referring to the realization of truth and to some psychic process of self-spiritual development. Tilopa handed down his doctrine to Narota, a learned Kashmiri and a Tibetan pupil of the latter, the Lama Marpa, brought it to his own country. The foremost disciple of Marpa, the famous anchorite poet Milarespa, in his turn communicated it to his disciple Dagpo Laji, and the lineal succession still continues nowadays under the name of the Kadyupa sect. And I'm going to pause here.